Hello, I'm Anawiltus, and today I am going to be discussing some of the comments on my video, Cell versus Cars, the ultimate mismatch. Now, why would I call this the ultimate mismatch, you might ask? Well, my assertion in the video is that Imperfect Cell would be able to easily defeat Cars even after he becomes the ultimate life form. So obviously, in that context, there would be people that would disagree. Now, let me actually go over to some of these comments here. So let me just say to all the people that commented on this, no disrespect. I'm taking your opinions as I see them. No disrespect to you or to your intellect or to your reasoning. I'm just reading what you wrote and answering based on what I know and what I think and what my opinion is. So here we go. So first comment here by Inky Gaming. Okay. The comment is, Cars would win because he can adapt any ability he wants perfectly and makes it more powerful than the original. A lot of people think that's restricted to the non-canon George Joestar, but that's wrong. Cars did it with Joseph's Ripple, so he could copy any and all of Cell's abilities. Now, there's a few problems with this. First of all, the example that is used does not actually demonstrate that. The reason why Cars was able to use the Ripple has to do with two things. First of all, Cars' ability to adapt his body in order to use the Ripple. Because the Ripple is generated physically through a special breathing technique and the circulation of the blood, and therefore it is possible to generate it if you know how to adapt your body properly to it. If, as you are accomplishing, as Cars is accomplishing this, he can modify his body to do that. Second of all, Cars actually had quite a bit of experience with the Ripple beforehand, as he had in ancient times been in combat with warriors that use the Ripple. So it's not as if he's seeing something that somebody else is doing and immediately copying it, because he obviously, for a long time, would have been able to figure out the internal mechanics of a Ripple and how to deal with it, which was actually one of the big and endangering things about the Pillarmen, was that they were familiar with a Ripple and actually had countermeasures for it. So in that sense, it makes sense that he would be able to copy Joseph's Ripple, because he's not actually copying Joseph directly, but is actually copying a long line of users of the Ripple. And of course, when it concerns language, that's another thing they were able to copy. That has to do with pattern recognition and the fact that the human brain, at least, is in a way wired for language. So it's not as if it's a difficult thing to discover. Now, of course, he's simply more proficient at doing it than the regular person is. Now, how would I then compare this to him being able to use Cell's abilities? Well, the thing is, some of Cell's abilities are granted to him by his biology, and of course, Cars' abilities primarily deal with altering his own biology in order to optimize it for various purposes and to eliminate his weaknesses. So obviously, there might be some potential for imitation, but to be fair, Cars specifically designed the stone masks to have what he specifically wanted to modify his body. In other words, as the designer of the stone masks aren't a magical item that just simply grants you an adaptation of everything in existence, but were rather specifically designed by him for a specific purpose. And of course, Cell doesn't exist in the universe of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, so Cars obviously would not have the exact abilities that Cell has and the exact physicality and genetics of Cell in mind when making the stone masks, and therefore that would not be borne out by the actual transformations that the stone masks give Cars. So in that sense, I would not think that he would be able to copy Cars' physical abilities. Copy Cell's physical abilities. Now, in regards to the abilities and techniques that Cell uses that are derived from Ki, the problem that I have with this is that unlike language, where it's a concern of pattern recognition, and the ripple, where Cars had actual experience with the ripple, even though he himself was not one using it. Although that's not to say that he never tried necessarily, because we know that Straits as a vampire was able to use the ripple, so it's not a far cry to say that one of the Pillarmen might have been able to use it, but chose not to for obvious reasons, because it would harm their own bodies if they did. But that's just speculation at that point. What I'm saying is that I have zero reason to believe that Cars would be able to copy the techniques that Cell uses that are Ki-based techniques, because of the simple reason that Ki as an energy is something that is not really biological, or at least not fully biological, but is something that is linked with the spirit. As we can see, various characters in Dragon Ball can still train their Ki-based techniques in the afterlife when they are physically dead, and are therefore training it with their spirit bodies, I suppose. So in that sense, Ki is not something that is necessarily based on the abilities that Cars has secured for himself. Now, what I'm not saying is that Cars wouldn't be able to use Ki, because he, in my view, probably would be able to use it, and would be able to learn how to use it and to develop it a lot faster than any of the characters in Dragon Ball, excepting, of course, Zenkai boosts and things, which Cars does not or would not have. But anyway, when it concerns that, I believe that Ki as something that is not really based on being able to pattern recognize or being able to see externally how it functions is not something that he would be able to learn how to use based on any short-term observation, even with how high his IQ is, which means that it would, at least for the purpose of one fight, be, in my view, impossible for him to develop to any degree to which he could actually pose a threat to Imperfect Cell, and even weaker characters in Dragon Ball. So in that sense, I do not believe that this argument actually bears fruit. Now, additionally, even if he were able to copy his techniques, the next question is, would he be able to reproduce them at the same magnitude that Cell can use these techniques? Because power scaling and the way combat works is very different in let's say the Android and Cell sagas of Dragon Ball than it is in parts 1 and 2 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Because in Dragon Ball, what you see is that although there is some use for trickery, some use for outwitting your opponent, ultimately being stronger in Dragon Ball and being faster and all of that can add up to the point that simply having better statistics for your various skills like speed and strength can give you advantages that are so significant that no matter of trickery can overcome them. And that's the big danger about villains like Boo, who despite at the beginning at least not being very strategic, was still able to overwhelm most characters when he was encountered, because of the simple fact that he was a lot stronger and a lot tougher than many of them. Now, of course, Cell, on the other hand, is a more intellectual character, not so much in his imperfect form, but especially if you get to perfect and super perfect Cell, he's more strategic when he fights. But when it concerns being able to actually damage Cell, I don't think that getting a basic knowledge of his techniques would actually enable Cars to actually damage him, because there's a big difference in magnitude. Now, I've sort of explained the difference here on one side on how power scaling works in Dragon Ball. It goes on orders of magnitude as characters become more powerful, and they need to become more powerful in order to defeat opponents who are significantly more powerful on orders of magnitude. Now, when it concerns the first two parts of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, it's actually quite different. And what's different about this? Well, the difference here is that the power scaling in the first two parts of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is largely based on versatility as opposed to magnitude. Now, I'm not saying that that the vampires and the Pillarmen aren't a lot more powerful than humans, but what I am saying is that a lot of the danger and the strength that they have is based on them being able to optimize their bodies in order to minimize their weaknesses and optimize their ability to attack. And it is for this reason that Jonathan Joestar was able to fight Dio in his mansion in the Joestar Manor, and actually come out on top before he even knew the Ripple, and while Dio had just become a vampire. Because although Dio was theoretically more powerful, Jonathan used his environment and his knowledge to take advantage of Dio's weaknesses and also to optimize his own chance of surviving the encounter. Now, with the Stone Mask, what the Stone Mask largely allows, or at least what I would describe is the most significant element of the power increase that someone gets from becoming a vampire, or as a Pillarman wearing a more advanced variant of a Stone Mask, is that it allows the user of these abilities to increase their ability to modify their own bodies in order to, again, optimize themselves for further advantages. So in that sense, I would say that JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is actually very friendly to the first law of thermodynamics, where you see the way the ripple works. It's based on breathing and circulation in order to then produce this energy that is derived from your bodily functions. And similarly, the stone mask having and being a vampire and a pillar man having a sort of opposite nature to this, also it has an emphasis on using your body and your nature and being able to alter that in order to maximize your advantages. And that's what you clearly see is the core of Kars's abilities. It's not becoming greater in magnitude in order to overwhelm his opponents with an increasing might, but rather it's being able to change parts of his body, being able to change his own nature so that he can take what he has and optimize it in order to then have such an enormous advantage. And that's primarily what the Pillarmen are doing in whenever they fight. They change their own bodies in order to use their nature at its limit and to push the limit of nature, which is what Karza is trying to do the whole time when he made the stone masks, to eventually overcome the sun, his great enemy, and become the ultimate life form, which he succeeds at the end. Now, despite being the ultimate life form, what we see is that Kars is still vulnerable to magma. When he fell into the volcano, he had to protect his body from directly contacting the magma because his cells would be destroyed and he would die. He would get burned up by the magma. In other words, Kars, despite having become the ultimate life form, did not actually break past the actual physical limitations of living tissue. And that is why he is the ultimate life form, not the ultimate god of everything or anything like that. It is because he acquired the powers of all different creatures that he had encountered throughout his travels around the world and had solidified that into finally achieving his dream of overcoming the fear that his people had of the sun and being able to eventually rule as the greatest life form of all. So in that sense, what I'm trying to say here is that on the one hand, you have a power scaling that is derived on increasing orders of magnitude, and on the other hand, you have a power scaling that focuses on an increase of versatility. The stone masks allowing the Pillarmen to modify their bodies even more to bring their abilities to their limits, and the ripple allowing Joseph Joestar in this instance to increase his options that he has when fighting his opponents, the Pillarmen. And he does defeat every single one of them. And that's how we see that by outwitting beings that in theory are a lot more powerful than him, he still manages to win. But unfortunately, that's not just for narrative reasons, but also for realistic reasons of magnitude. That does not happen as frequently in Dragon Ball. Or at least the parts of Dragon Ball that I'm talking about. So anyway, there you go. I don't think that Kars would be able to immediately learn Cell's abilities just by looking at them, simply because of the nature of the kinds of abilities that Cell is using. And two, I don't think that even if he were able to learn those abilities, that he would have a proficiency in them to increase his magnitude to the point that he would actually be able to survive any serious attack by Cell. Because the power scaling here is Piccolo destroyed the moon in the Saiyan saga. Now, Piccolo then eventually ends up fighting Frieza, but he's not as powerful as Frieza, and Frieza goes into his final form, and he fights Goku. Now, Frieza, in his base form, or you could say suppressed state, he was capable of destroying planet Vegeta, so he can destroy planets in that form, and Piccolo managed to fight him in a form that was more powerful than that form after merging with, after doing fusion with Nail, and then Goku becomes a Super Saiyan. He defeats Frieza, but Vegeta also becomes a Super Saiyan. But ultimately, Vegeta and Trunks aren't powerful enough to beat Android 18 and 17. But then Piccolo, he fuses with Kami and then becomes an actual threat to the androids. But he also encounters Cell. So at this point in his story, Cell and Piccolo and androids 17 and 18 are close enough levels in power that they can actually fight each other without it being a one-sided battle. So in that sense, compared directly to Piccolo, Cell in his imperfect state is more powerful than Super Saiyan Vegeta, and is also more powerful than Frieza in his final form, who was able to destroy planets. And also, by comparison with Piccolo, again, is more powerful than Piccolo. Well, not necessarily at this point, but he was... What I'm saying is he's more powerful than Piccolo in the Saiyan saga when Piccolo destroyed the moon. So you want to tell me that in the course of maybe a minute or perhaps less, that Ultimate Cars can A, see through and understand Cell's use of Ki, and B, learn how to use Ki himself, and C, then grow to a degree of power that he can survive an attack that, at the very least, could destroy the moon. I don't think that's very likely. Let's be honest here. I don't think that that's very likely to happen. Occam's razor, very unlikely. So here we go. Cars would die 1 billion times over and over because he's immortal. By Throw Low See Blow. I'm going to tell you right now that Cars is not immortal in the sense that he is immune to his body being destroyed. So he would not die 1 million times over. He would in fact die completely in the first hit, assuming that the hit hits him squarely. He might perhaps last second dodge, although he's a lot slower than Imperfect Cell, so I don't think that's likely to happen either, but he might dodge part of his body, but I don't think he has the ability to survive a direct hit from Cell. Okay, here's you by Jovit. You cannot just throw Cars in DBZ universe. You need to put them both in universes in pot. Otherwise, doesn't it make sense? and I actually had responded to this comment. I worked under the neutral assumption that both characters can use their respective powers to the fullest extent. The exact way that these powers interact is entirely speculation. So until there's an official crossover between Dragon Ball and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, we actually won't know whether these things are compatible or incompatible. And even in crossovers, because I know that there's been other Dragon Ball crossovers with other things like Naruto, One Piece, Toriko, things like that. Let's be honest, those things aren't power scaled. They don't count, they're not canon. They don't make sense from the perspective of power scaling. Because you actually want me to believe that all these characters fight on equal footing. That's simply not true. So, obviously, we're making a lot of assumptions. What I'm assuming is that both their powers work as intended by the authors. That's what I'm assuming. Now, of course, you could say... On the flip side, someone could argue, well, what if Cell sees Cars using the Ripple, and then Cell copies Cars' Ripple? I don't think anyone said that, but it's not impossible. Cell learned how to use instant transmission, but so you never know. And it took Goku a year to learn that. Okay, here it says it took. From John Stark here. It took BSing to beat Cars. The fight is more even than you think. It's not, actually. From the perspective of power scaling here, it simply is not. Cell is magnitudinally many times greater in power than Cars is. Cars needs to be able to survive Cell's first hit, that is his first ki blast. He might be able to survive a physical hit if Cell decides to punch him or something. Cell might try to eat him, which could work. It might not work. That's where you have the issue. The one theoretical scenario that you can't figure out whether Cars might actually win. Would Cell be able to eat Ultimate Cars? I don't know. I'm thinking he might be able to, but at the same time, who knows? He might not be able to. But I don't think it's BSing to say that that Cell has an overwhelming advantage. I don't think that's BSing. Maybe I wasn't clear enough in the original video. I don't know. Here it says, Cars is the perfect being. Cell is just perfect Cell. Cell is just a better version of himself, while Cars is better than anyone and anything who'll ever be, which is why Cell doesn't stand a chance in 14 million. No noun attached to the adjective. Here's the problem. This sounds like a troll comment, but I'm going to respond anyway. Let me just say, names don't mean anything in power scaling. You can say that you're perfect. You can say that you're the best. You can say that you're the strongest in the omniverse or the multiverse or whatever you want to call it. But that doesn't actually mean anything if another author in somewhere else makes a character that has better feats or stronger feats than your character. It doesn't matter what titles you have. So names actually don't mean anything here. So, because Cars is the perfect being, okay, in the perspective, in his own perspective, in the perspective of what he knows, because he's the one that made the masks. This is what everybody forgets. Cars made the mask. He is limited to the powers that he himself designed the mask to give him. That is what Kars' limitation is. He can't do something that he did not expect that he might that he might need to do. You know what I'm saying? Kars did not expect to have to fight an enemy that can fire a Kamehameha, a Masenko, and use the multi-form technique, and do the solar flare, and all these different techniques that Cell can do. Kars did not expect this. Therefore, the mask is not designed to prepare him for this. Just saying. Also, Cell, of course, he determines himself to be perfect because of the specific fact that he was designed to eat Android 17 and 18 in order to achieve his complete form. It also doesn't mean that he is absolutely perfect, because that's why later on he ends up becoming super perfect Cell, where he realized that he's now more perfect than he originally was as perfect. So there you go. There's someone with a YouTube link. I'm not going to click that right now. But here we go. King Kuruk. Ultimate Kars possesses all the abilities of every life form on Earth, amplified, and can control his body on the cellular level, perhaps even more. Well, yeah, I could argue that there's more, because cells release chemicals, and actually, I don't think he'd be able to independently control exactly the movements of every protein in his body. I don't think he'd be able to do that. But here we go. He turned his hand into a vampire squirrel, flower butterfly, then back into a hand. Also, Cell doesn't have any techniques that can truly kill Kars. The regeneration of a Pillar Man is even greater than a vampire's regeneration. All I'm going to say there is, if Kars, Ultimate Kars, that is, we have to remember, this is Ultimate Kars, had fallen into the volcano and done absolutely nothing, he would have died. That's what would have happened. If he had simply decided not to protect his body, he would have died. I don't think anyone can dispute that from a narrative perspective. So he's not unkillable. It's just that he's unkillable to any weapon that Joseph Joestar was able to successfully bear against him. But he's not unkillable absolutely. Okay. Just because he hasn't faced a planet or solar system buster doesn't mean he doesn't have the ability to survive. I'm assuming that's a planet-busting attack. If he can't survive taking a dive in a volcano, okay, skinny dipping, that is. I know he made a little armor for himself, but if he hadn't had that armor on, he would have died, okay? And it wasn't as if this armor was made of some ultimate durable stuff. That's just some rocks, man. If he hadn't done that, he would have died. And you want me to expect that an attack that can destroy an actual planet wouldn't kill Kars when he can't take a skinny dip in a volcano? I don't think that that's a reasonable expectation to have, that he'd be able to survive. Okay. The guy hasn't survived the vacuum. The guy survived the vacuum of space, lava, okay, and again, he surrounded himself with a shell that wouldn't be able to protect him from a planet-busting attack because it's made of the same substance that a planet-busting attack would be able to destroy. So no, that doesn't count, and is apparently the strongest character in JoJo universe. if he ever came back, Earth would be doomed. I don't know. Some stands are pretty strong. So yeah. Plus, he has an IQ of over 400. He's so effing smart. He doesn't get tired. And worst of all, he can manipulate himself and adapt mid-battle where effed. Again, I'm not disputing his ability to adapt. I'm just saying that you need to be reasonable in how you extend this and actually think in detail as to, for example, why. How would he be able to discern how to use ki? This isn't something that you innately discern. This isn't something that you can tell from pattern recognition. This is something that requires some introspection and knowledge and meditation in order to work out. And I don't care if your IQ is 1,000, if you don't have the info that you need, you're not going to accomplish the task. So that's my response to that. Okay. The only way, this is from the AVG Crusader, the only way Cars can win is to take into Hamon into effect. I guess he used an extra into. Cars can use Hamon, which is the ripple, almost as hot as a star. Can he, though? Almost as hot as a star? Well, but I still think Cell is too fast. Basically, Cars needs to know things about Cell to win, like his speed, power, moves, etc., which he doesn't. And this is my exact point. If Cell actually tries to kill Cars, would Cars even be able to adapt? I don't think it would. And this is coming from a JoJo fan here. Cars and Cell don't work. It's dumb. I agree. Cell will destroy Cars, no problem. Okay. So, from King Kuruk, there's actually 10 comments responding to him. So let's see. So we're gonna go for a little comment section debate here. So the average Crusader responds to King Kuruk. This is all true, but Cell does have the better healing factor, as he has as he was able to regenerate his whole body in a matter of seconds from a single cell. That's true. Well, let me be clear here. That's Perfect Cell that can do that. That's not Imperfect Cell. And although Cars' healing factor is pretty absurd, anything can be killed if all cells of that being are destroyed, which is something Cell can do. And I agree. I don't think Cars' cells are capable of surviving the temperature that would physically destroy their molecules. I don't think Cell is capable of doing that, because his abilities revolve primarily around morphing his body and morphing his biology, not actually going fully supernatural in that sense specifically, in the sense that he generally does not use abilities that you could fully qualify as him increasing the power of his body beyond the point that his physical properties should uphold. That's what I'm going to say here. So it is a matter of physics here, but King Kuruk responds. And Cars has the ultimate counter, an ability we've seen the Pillarmen use multiple times, being able to go into the bodies of any living creature. Again, the characters in Dragon Ball, they have a lot of ki, and they use that ki to strengthen their bodies in order to prevent things like this, someone digging through your body and going into it. So I don't know if he would be able to do that to Cell. Now, of course, Cell might try to eat him, with his tail, which might which again, this is the one thing where Cars might have an avenue to go in and actually beat Cell in that way, or maybe his cells die while he's being absorbed, in which case it doesn't work. But I don't know whether that would work or not work. And that's, again, an issue of trying to combine two things that are completely different and completely separate. Cars can just go into Cell, destroy his nucleus, then devour him from the inside out, and without his nucleus, Cell wouldn't be able to use his self-destruct without permanently killing himself as a result. Checkmate. Again, Imperfect Cell probably isn't going to try to self-destruct. The reason why Cell tried to self-destruct was because even though he had become perfect, he was still getting beaten. And in fact, beaten so much that he reverted to his semi-perfect form. So, and that, of course, made him very angry and upset, because at this point, his hubris had reached many heights. So I don't think Imperfect Cell would want to self-destruct at all, because he's trying to achieve his perfect form. So from a character standpoint, that would be very out of character. But again, I see no reason why Cars would be able to do this. I see no reason why Cars' ability to invade other bodies is more powerful than Cell's ability to repel damage to his own body and to eat other bodies. So there's no solid reason to believe that this would work, is what I'm saying. Now, I'm not saying that it's impossible from a standpoint of abilities. I'm just saying that because of just how lower down in the orders of magnitude Cars' power is, we don't even know if he could actually harm Cell's physical cells. Okay, let's see. Cars has never done that, only Santana. And that is true. Now, I would believe that Cars probably is able to do that. So I don't think that this is a valid argument here. To correct you, every Pillar Man has an ability. Santana's ability is symbiosis. Wamu's is air-related. ACDC's is fire. Well, if we're talking about Cars, the ultimate life form, the perfect life form, he would be able to do all the things that the other Pillar Men are able to do. So I don't think that this is something that he can't do. So that's a bad argument, the AVG Crusader. King Kuruk responds, dude, Wamu did it during his final battle with Joseph. He went inside one of his vampire horses and popped out to surprise attack Joseph. You need to rewatch the anime or reread the manga. Pillar Men have a bunch of powers, and Wamu, ACDC, and Cars have a special ability among the other powers. Now, let me say this, that the other members of a race probably don't have most of the powers that they have, and it's not simply, and I'm not saying simply that they don't have the special abilities that they show off that make them unique. I'm saying that they probably are weaker than vampires, and the reason is that the stone masks were originally designed to make them more powerful. So vampires who use the stone masks become more powerful based on the powers that the Pillar Men wanted to give themselves to make themselves more powerful. So in their original state, their race probably isn't actually that much more powerful than humans, of course, accepting various things. But we don't know that for sure because we haven't actually seen that very much. So, the AVG Crusader. Well, it seems I forgot a bit. here's my thing. Doesn't Cell absorb things to begin with? If Cars attempted to go inside Cell, wouldn't Cell just absorb him? Okay, and the response from King Kuruk, Cell has to use his stinger. Cars can do it from inside Cell's own body, and I'm pretty sure Cell isn't going to risk it, especially if Cars gets a hold of his nucleus. Now again, how would Cars get inside Cell outside of the stinger? Because Cell can tank attacks that could destroy planets. I'm gonna say that he can take these hits, and you expect me to believe that Cars can go through his skin. I don't think that's very likely. Now, I'm not saying it's 100% impossible. It might be a crossover someday. Probably not. But, not likely. Okay, and the response is, VG Crusader, this is fair, but I still think Cell is too fast for Cars to be able to catch Cell in the first place, seeing as he can use instant transmission, or at least I think he can. Well, he can use it at the very end. He can't use it as Imperfect Cell. But this is if Cell gets to his perfect form to begin with. But again, the argument I made in the video is that even Imperfect Cell could defeat Cars. And I might even argue and say down to Saiyan Saga Piccolo could one-shot Cars. Now, I don't know if Saiyan Saga Piccolo would be able to counterattack Cars' absorption or anything. I don't know whether he'd be able to do that. All I know is that if you can destroy a moon, you can one-shot Cars. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that he would win against him in every possible matchup, but I am saying that he can one-shot him, which is something that Cars can't do to him. Okay, and the response, the Alpha, the Omega. Going inside him is pointless if you can't even catch him. Cell is way faster than Cars. True. Dragon Ball characters can destroy characters that can regenerate at the same level as Cars. And here's another one. Cars' regeneration from Stealthier. Cars' regeneration could be scaled to Part 3 Dio's regeneration after he absorbed Joseph's blood, who also scales to the Nijimura's father, who, as stated by his son Keicho, none of the stands that he had ever found was able to kill his father, which would include his brother Okuyasu's stand, the hand, which is able to erase matter from existence, meaning the Nijimura's father can regenerate from his mind and or soul, and he's literally fused with one of Dio's flesh buds. But again, Dio himself got killed, so just saying. Although I'm not saying that Cars would ever win against Cell. Okay, so what I'm seeing here is that in order for Cars to beat Cell, you essentially have to ignore Cell's toughness and his speed in dodging attacks, and the magnitude of the power with which he can hit Cars, which would very likely one-shot him. And for Cars to win, other than trying to absorb him, he would have to be able to figure out what Cell is doing with Ki, then figure out how to use it himself, and then grow to a magnitude where his use actually rivals Cell's, Imperfect Cells. And again, that's far-fetched. So, thank you all for listening. I guess this has been a bit longer than I originally expected, but I decided to, just get a fuller look at the comments and answer some questions, some objections that there have been. If someone out there would want to actually talk to me on my show about this particular issue or about other power scaling issues, feel free to do so. Although of late I've been more focusing on political philosophy and such things, I'm always happy to talk about power scaling and other intellectual pursuits. So thank you all for watching, and I'll be seeing you all next time. Anawiltus over and out.